Hello and welcome back to another episode of Pragmatic Optimist. I am State Senator Tiara Mack and I am joined by attorney Rachel Cohen. And today we are going to be talking about snapping back on the Republicans who have decided that depriving 40 million Americans of food benefits is the responsible thing to do in order to continue their government shutdown, which is aimed at increasing tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans at the expense of healthcare premiums, which Republicans have now held our government hostage over. So, Rachel, when I think about these SNAP benefits, I immediately think about my own experience as a formerly low income Black person who grew up with parents who worked paycheck to paycheck and who relied on SNAP benefits, formerly known as food stamps, in order to make ends meet. Oftentimes, my family had to make hard decisions about paying for our electricity or our water bill or rent or having food in the pantry. This is something that millions of Americans can relate to, millions of hardworking, everyday Americans, some of which work 2 and 3 jobs in order to put food on the table. The vast majority of recipients of SNAP are children or elderly or veterans. 1 in 8 Americans rely on SNAP benefits in order to buy groceries. And that is a troubling enough statement in the richest country in the history of the world, but I believe a responsible government's role and duty is to ensure that its citizens have the basic needs and necessities like food. And so the devastating cuts that are approaching on November 1st are not only a failure of our government, but another tactic that the Republicans are using to hold their government hostage in order to pad the pockets of their billionaire buddies to have more tax breaks and to continue to hold the American people hostage to a vision of America that no one is asking for. And the only people who are going to suffer are the millions of people who will not be able to afford groceries at the beginning of this month. And for anyone who doesn't think that they are going to be impacted, I believe I saw that like $80 billion worth of grocery store purchases are made through SNAP benefits. If those dollars are not in the economy on November 1st, so many grocery store prices are going to increase because they've lost an entire market of people who will no longer be able to afford groceries. So even if you are not someone who relies on SNAP benefits, the trickle down of these impacts are going to hit you and your wallets. It's going to make it more expensive for every American to go to the grocery store and pay for their groceries, something that's already increased by lots of percentage points under this current administration and is only going to get more expensive. So as we continue on this fast track to one of the worst possible scenarios in this shutdown, I want to just know what you are hearing. I have seen some states are deploying the National Guard in order to get benefits to people. Some states are calling for a state of emergency. A lot of states have rainy day funds that they're going to deploy, but it's really risky. The cost of food and SNAP programs, I can only talk about Rhode Island. This is the state that I'm in. It would cost our state for 1 month of benefits, $30 million. Most states do not have the funds to support that level of need, which is why we rely on the federal government to supply most of that funding. And so this is not simply an expense that states can take on even with rainy day funds because it is too costly. Food banks and food bank infrastructure is not robust enough to catch all of the people who were already relying on food banks before this shutdown. One, because rents are too high, wages are too low, and people are cash strapped in so many different ways. But because we're going to be losing SNAP benefits, they're going to be overrun and inundated in communities that already have empty food pantry shelves. But I just wanted to get your thoughts of what you're hearing and what you're seeing as we approach this critical November 1st deadline.
God, I have so many thoughts. There's a lot here.
Yeah.
The first and most immediate thought that I had is that I actually did not know that it was possible for billionaires to get more tax breaks. I did not know that we were still taxing these motherfuckers, given how many tax breaks they have already received over the course of this period of time, really since Ronald Reagan, which a theme of Pragmatic Optimists, just a reminder, this is not something that has sprung up under the Trump administration, right? And one of the things about SNAP specifically is that it's one of the only ways that people get cash assistance now, that low-income people get cash assistance, because under Ronald Reagan, and another theme of pragmatic optimists, because we are pragmatic as well as being optimists, not rolled back under presidents like Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, is moving away from low-income people getting assistance provided directly to them because there was no trust of low-income people to manage those resources. And even SNAP is highly regulated in terms of what is eligible for EBT benefits and what is not, which takes me back always to an experience that I had when I was probably 19 or 20 years old, walking up High Street outside of Ohio State University, which is the main road outside of Ohio State where I went to undergrad, to the bars with other underage friends. And we walked past someone who was unhoused, and I happened to have cash and gave them a couple of dollars or $5. And some guy who looked and acted and grew up to be exactly who you think, who I knew through Greek life, said, "Why would you just give him that money? They're just going to spend that money on alcohol." And I was like, where are we going? Where do you think we are? Like, what are you talking about? All of this to say, I want to answer your question and then come back to my own little tangent, which what I am hearing is very specific to the federal government level, which is that USDA has contingency funds that up until a couple of weeks, maybe a month ago, they said on their website they would be using to extend SNAP, even if there was an ongoing government shutdown. And they are now taking the posture that it would be illegal for them to use those contingency funds, or that they can't use those contingency funds because those contingency funds are meant for, a real emergency like a hurricane, because you know what? The US government is doing a really good job of taking care of people in the wake of climate-based natural disasters at this moment. But they're using people's literal starvation as a bargaining chip in a country where the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. Tiara, you and I launched American Demands, which is a list of like progressive policy platform points that we think Democrats should be lining up behind. And someone commented on one of our videos about raising the federal minimum wage, saying that that wasn't a thing and that minimum wage was handled at the state and local levels, state and city levels, because it's been so long since the federal minimum wage was raised that some people don't realize that it exists at all. And so we have this country that is selling out the most vulnerable, that is refusing to use resources that have already been allocated to make sure that people can continue to purchase things. Because here's something else, is you have lived experience with SNAP and EBT. I do not. I grew up the child of two government attorneys. And so I learned a lot about SNAP and EBT and what these benefits looked like when you and I were both educators in Rhode Island. And I had a number of students who used EBT either I taught high school, and so either in a family sense, or some of my students who were living independently as high schoolers needed help applying for EBT themselves. And some of the things that I realized as I was helping them with this were just how low these payouts are. I think that people really don't understand. That's why celebrities will sometimes do like the food stamp challenge to see if you can live on the grocery budget that you get on EBT, which is exceptionally low. It's like $100-something for a family over the course of a month. It is really, really not sufficient, especially in the current inflation-ridden state that we find ourselves in. That it's extremely hard to apply for and confusing to apply for, that you're only eligible for it if you meet certain criteria, that the federal poverty line is unbelievably low. I'm actually going to look it up right now because it feels, yeah. Oh my God. It's like you're only eligible if you are at or below like, so for individuals, the federal poverty line is $15,650 annually. That's, and some of these things you're eligible for if you're at below 200%. So if you're below like $30,000 a year annually, but imagine living on $30,000 as an individual in like the city of Chicago, and then being told that you don't actually, the federal government can't be bothered to give you food assistance. It's just unbelievable. Yeah. Sorry, Tiara.
Well, just one side note, $30,000 a year for an individual is roughly $15 an hour for the year after taxes. Like $15 an hour, which is double the federal minimum wage. is a $36,000. My math is a little off. It's been a while since I've done annual, but that is someone who's making the minimum wage at the double of the minimum wage.
And I think that becomes really cyclical, right? Is that people justify, well, the federal poverty line can be that like it should be that low because it should be connected to the federal minimum wage, and it's like, right, but the federal minimum wage is insane. It's insane for people to live on, especially as this government is attempting to be pro-natalist and telling people that they're supposed to have more children. Like, it's just fucking insane. So I wouldn't even say off the rails. I just think that there's a lot of things to talk about in this particular context. And the last thing that I want to talk about before I turn it back over to you, because we are going to try and keep this under 15 minutes, is that this notion that we don't have funding for things that make people's lives better, but we can accept private donations so that Trump can deploy the National Guard to cities that do not want him. I have become very convinced by commenters who are saying this is not a true shutdown, this is a takeover. Because if it was a true shutdown, you wouldn't see ICE agents out tear gassing communities. You wouldn't see ICE agents being actively hired. They're still hiring people. And I know that I said I don't have like EBT experience, but my parents were both government attorneys. And so I do have shutdown experience. And this is not how this shit works. And instead, what they are doing is funding whatever they want illegally and refusing to fund whatever it is that makes people's lives better in an attempt to pin that on the Democrats, because they're going to argue that the Democrats could reopen the government. But I would be shocked, honestly, if they even allowed Democrats to reopen the government at this point, because Donald Trump has realized that he can do whatever he wants. So back to you. Anything. I know I didn't give you much to work with there, but
oh my God. Well, I think one of the things that this reminds me of, and the Republicans have been effective at shutting down our government and giving the Democrats all of the ammo, but because we have a bunch of weak-spined individuals who can't get out of their own way to see the bigger picture, I fear that this moment is being lost on Americans about what leverage the Democrats should be using in order to force their agenda to protect American people. Because what this strategic withholding of SNAP benefits and funds is attempting to do for the Republicans is cause enough pain, more pain than people are already in order to convince them that the government needs to be reopened again to raise premiums on healthcare. Some people will see, and we're already almost at the point of no return. There's going to be the open enrollment period opening up in states for those who are Medicaid, and people are going to go in, log in, and see their premiums have skyrocketed 3-4 times of what they were before. People are going to be spending thousands of dollars on healthcare because the Republicans are holding our government hostage, and the Democrats have shut down our government and have refused to sign a bill that does not address keeping Obama era and Biden era subsidies for healthcare. That is what we are trying to protect the American people from. The Republicans on that same front know that they can try to inflict as much pain as possible. Federal workers who are not getting paid, TSA agents who are showing up every day to keep your flights on track, who are not getting paid, who are trying to either get low interest rate loans or working separate jobs, or simply not showing up because they have to work a gig in order to be able to pay their bills because they're expected to show up. That is what the Democrats should be messaging right now. The reason why we in this moment have resorted to a reality where food security is going to be on the chopping block and is going to harm many Americans is because if we don't allow Republicans to show what evil tactics they are willing to deploy on the American people for their billionaire buddies, we are going to lose affordability for so many people. People are going to lose healthcare. We are going to see a world in which America, one of the wealthiest countries that spends the most per capita on healthcare, is going to continue to see health disparities impact people's quality of life, their longevity, and what communities have access to. Not only are your grocery bills going to increase because of the lack of SNAP benefits, your healthcare costs, even you who have private insurance, are going to increase because there are going to be so many people relying on emergency services or on healthcare healthcare, who don't have access to insurance. This impacts every single one of us. This is the world that the Republicans are trying to build and that they're trying to shove down our throats by any means necessary. And the Democrats have not fought back and tried to highlight this issue as something that we should all care about. Red states, blue states, purple states, blue bubbles and red states, red pockets and blue states. Everyone from the wealthiest, well, the wealthy, they won't be impacted by this, but the people who cannot afford to lose are the ones who
the extremely wealthy, though. I think that's really something worth comment. Just naming too that there's this real sense of like, well, the wealthy, privileged. So many Americans think they are the wealthy when they're not.
Exactly.
Like if you're taking home less than like $1 million a year, you're not wealthy. Like you might be in a global context, but you're still going to be affected by this. And so I'm sorry to enter. It's just like, it's not even just the wealthy. It's literally
the
like
ultra rich.
3 digits of people. It's like a couple hundred people, maybe like a couple thousand, but it is fewer than 10,000 people who are not going to be negatively impacted by this, honestly.
And I think that's so important. And this is, and I know we're trying to wrap it up, but before I get to what is giving hope, so many people do not realize who we are fighting against. We are fighting against the people and companies that have settled their disagreements or settled their illegal attacks by this administration by donating $20 million to a golden ballroom. These are people who have settled hundreds of millions of dollars of bribes for this administration in order to continue to do the work that they want to do, and that doesn't benefit the American people. Rachel, we've talked about this before on like some of our first episodes about the pro bono legal work that big law firms are giving to this administration in the tune of almost $1 billion or over $1 billion of pledges of pro bono legal services. This is all money that if these companies wanted to, they would be giving to their workers or their communities that cannot afford food next month. But instead, they have been licking the boots of this administration and of Donald Trump in order to placate him so they can continue to get tax breaks and or government contracts to keep their companies as supreme wealth hoarders in this country. But what gives me hope is that communities are coming together. Our government is failing. There are people who are going to be hurting. Food bank infrastructure has already been stretched to the limit, but mutual aid networks are showing up. There are people who are going to be donating food and time and resources. If you can partner with the grocery store, you can use resources like findhelp.org to find your closest food bank. I encourage neighbors, friends, and communities to really pour into your local infrastructure because the people in your community need it now more than ever. Findhelp.org is one location to find food pantries near you. Go to your local food banks at the state level and please donate money if you can, time if you are not able, and organize your own food drives for the people that you know will need it. And as we wrap up, we'll have a couple other episodes for this week. But thank you, Praggies, and we will see you on another topic this week.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.